Welcome, Irish fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince DeDario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is the publisher of irishbreakdown.com. And his name is Bryan Driskell. And between the two of us, the dynamic duo of irishbreakdown.com, we are going to bring you our predictions for the Notre Dame Alabama college football playoff semifinal game that is going to take place January 1st at 4 o'clock in the afternoon down in Dallas at the Rose Bowl. And I've said that like 10 times, and it still doesn't work for me. But the Rose Bowl is taking place in Dallas, and Notre Dame is going to partake in that game for the first time, I believe, since 1925 that they are in the Rose Bowl. So,
head coach for Notre Dame in 1925 was?
Newt Rockne.
There you go.
Yes!
I don't like that you said that with a question mark sound at the end, but, it's all good. You got it right.
Trivia is not my bag, and if you ever have a silent time with Sean Stiers, he will tell you that trivia is not my bag. That was a very embarrassing portion of my life back in 2004, but I digress.
Now I'm curious. I'm going to text Sean right now real quick. Give me a second.
You probably should.
Shoot him a quick email.
But anyway, you and I have dissected this game from every which way. And if you haven't heard our podcast, go back and listen. We break down the Notre Dame's offense versus Alabama's defense. Alabama's
from a matchup
offense
standpoint, diving into the X's and O's, schematics, really diving into the coaching aspect of it. We're breaking down film.
Absolutely. Yep. And then what are the keys for success on Notre Dame's side on both sides of the ball? So those are podcasts that are already up.
4 of them. Matchup scheme on both sides of the ball, and then keys to success on both sides of the ball. So and not just keys to success, keys to victory.
Absolutely. And
because that is attainable in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. And if you're driving down to Dallas, just go ahead and throw us on, because we'll keep you company the whole way down, baby.
Well, especially as much as I like to talk, our podcasts tend to be longer. So if you're on a road trip, it's even better.
I'm telling you.
Yes, my long-windedness can come in handy in situations like that.
You have kept me company on numerous trips down to Indianapolis with my son. So
that's why I do what I do.
Whether you knew it or not, my friend, you kept me company. So, okay, Irish fans, it is that time. We are going to give our score predictions, and then we are going to tell you why we gave our score predictions. So, Bryan, do you want to lead us off here?
No, you kick it off first, buddy. You go first.
Oh. Okay. Well, let me just preface this with the fact that this was probably the hardest prediction I've ever had to write up as a Notre Dame fan, as a Notre Dame analyst. And I went through everything we've talked about over the last week and a half. And my prediction for this game is Notre Dame 17, Alabama 45.
Okay, I thought you were about to say 17-14 or something like that, and we were about to have a problem.
No.
So what's the score in the second, in the third, and the fourth quarters going to be?
That would have been my first quarter score.
Okay.
But no, 17
Alabama
to
45, Notre Dame 17.
That's what I've got. Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you 2 scores.
Oh, I knew you were going to do this.
Because I can.
I knew it.
And I'm going to take a different route. Initially, I was going to go kind of like my heart versus my head. And I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to go about it this way, because I have a point to make, and I'll get to it when we get into why I'm predicting these scores. My first score is going to be based on what I think can happen if Notre Dame plays their game, based on the fact that I think these rosters are a lot more even than people think. And I'm going to explain that when we get into this part of the prediction. And in that prediction, I'm going with Notre Dame 37-34. Okay? In the upset.
Yeah.
In the second prediction, I'm going to go with my score based on recent history of the Brian Kelly tenure, based on my lack of proof that this offense can play well in this kind of game for Notre Dame, and then the burden that they're going to put the defense in. And in that version, I'm going Alabama 47, Notre Dame 20. And I don't think it's going to be overly close in that scenario. I think it'll be close early because I think the Notre Dame defense will play well, but I think in the end I'm going with 47-20. That's based more on history and in lack of evidence of Notre Dame doing what I think they're capable of doing.
Sure.
And I'm going to explain the difference between the two when we kind of dive into how we think this game is going to play out.
Well, just to comment quickly on that, your second score prediction is very close to my score prediction.
And I'm looking at it the same way you are. That's your fear, right?
That's exactly.
We've talked about this game a lot the last 2 weeks, Vince.
Right.
Not just on the air, but, we talk a lot off. And I know where you're coming from. We're on the same page. We look at the film. We look at the stats. We've both – you've probably watched more film of Alabama than you have anybody all season.
Absolutely correct.
And of course, you've watched every snap that Notre Dame has played. So I know that you believe what I believe, which is this is a lot closer matchup than people think. I still think Bama's the better team. I think Bama's the best team in the country.
Sure, I agree with that.
And so, and as I've said in other shows, if Notre Dame gives them a 4-quarter game and loses, then I'm going to tip my cap to the Notre Dame team and say, hey, great job, guys. You ended this season in an impressive fashion. You gave the best team in the country everything that they can handle. But I do think that Notre Dame can win this game, and I believe because Notre Dame has been in more battles, I think this year, that if it is a 4th-quarter game, I think they got a chance to pull it out, which is why I went with the upset in my other one. But I do know that where you're coming from, Vince, and it is not – you do not think that Alabama – is necessarily 28 points better than Notre Dame talent-wise.
I don't. Not even close to that.
There, if we're taking our fan hat off, right, and we're looking at this from an analyst, hey, that's not a fan hat, buddy. That's a work hat, baby. If we're taking our fan hat off and we're putting on our former coaches and analysts and really diving in the film hat, that's where the more blowout score comes from. And it's not because either of us think that Alabama is a 4-touchdown better football team from a talent standpoint. I think they're a better coach football team, and I think they're a more proven football team in these types of games, and that's why I went with what I went with. And that's just what Notre Dame has done. Well, they haven't been in this situation. There's been really one time they've been in this situation against a team that I viewed as a legitimate championship caliber team, which was healthy, that they didn't get blown out. And that was in 2014 when they played Florida State. That was it. I don't count Georgia as being that same kind of team because Georgia has 0 titles and Georgia is not a championship caliber team yet.
Right.
And in Clemson, I still think is a really good team, but is anyone picking Clemson to win the national title if DJ Uiagalelei is still their quarterback right now?
That's pretty good, by the way. Good job.
I've been practicing. I'm like in the mirror, like, okay, how do I say this? No, they wouldn't. I mean, are they still a really good team? Yeah. Are they still a top 5 to 10 team? Absolutely. But they're not the same as they are with Trevor Lawrence. Now, they may be when DJ's a sophomore or junior, if he becomes a senior.
2 years from now, I think they're going to be pretty darn good.
Sure. And Notre Dame has to play them 2 years from now.
I'm aware.
Same year that they play Ohio State. That's the thing is the only team where you say that, boy, that's a championship caliber team and Notre Dame went toe-to-toe with them was 2014. And I'm hopeful that this team can do that. But the difference is that was a little bit more of an potentially explosive kind of offense, whereas I don't think this team is quite that, but they've just been blown out so many times that it's hard for me to justify as an analyst that this game is going to be competitive. But, as far as looking at trends in history,
right.
But I also see as an analyst that there are some areas where Notre Dame has significant advantages against Alabama and other areas where they have slight advantages against Alabama, which I don't necessarily know was necessarily the case, except maybe 1 or 2 spots in 2012 or even against Clemson in 2018. Sure. So that's why I do see a scenario in which Notre Dame can win, and we'll dive into that.
Well, and I think another reason for why I went the way I went, and you outlined it for me, but the more I hear Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees, and they've met the media obviously the last few days, and I just keep hearing over and over, we're going to do what we do. Mm-hmm. The offense is what we are, and blah blah blah. That's disturbing to me because. We've watched, you said it, we've watched every snap of Notre Dame. We've watched a bunch of Alabama. Doing what you do is not going to beat Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have the personnel to beat Alabama. We've talked about that. Again, go back to that rankings article that you put out, the recruiting rankings between Notre Dame and Alabama. It's a lot closer than people think.
And it's not even just that. Here's my frustration with it, and I'll say it right now. I'll kind of jump the gun a little bit because we haven't quite dove into why we're making these predictions. Everybody wants to look at recruiting rankings and that's why Alabama is better.
Right.
Okay, let's pump the brakes for a second, okay? Alabama starting defensive end Justin Aboigbe was I believe a 5-star recruit. He was definitely a top 100 guy. He was one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Would you trade him for Adi Ogundeji? We asked this in another podcast. Would you?
Right. No, I wouldn't.
Adi was a 3-star kid they flipped from Western Michigan. I wouldn't trade him.
Western Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was a 3-star recruit that Notre Dame beat Virginia and Michigan State for. Would you trade him for Dylan Moses, the 5-star stud at Alabama? No. Would you trade him for Christian Harris? I wouldn't.
Nope.
Would you trade him for Christopher Allen? Or I wouldn't.
No.
And so that's where I get to is there's plenty of places where we could have that same argument, and look, right now, Evan Neal, 5-star player, he's not better than Robert Hainsey. Robert Hainsey wasn't exactly a 3-star recruit either. Robert Hainsey was a top 100 caliber player.
Right.
Notre Dame's got plenty of big time players on their team.
A lot of All-Americans on the offensive line.
Right. And Najee Harris is a 5-star player, great player. Is the gap between him and Kyron Williams really that you'd expect of a 5-star and a 3-star?
Right.
I don't think it is. So it's about talent, not about stars. And when I look at this Notre Dame football team, Kyle Hamilton, there's not a safety on Alabama's roster that I would trade for Kyle Hamilton. There's not a linebacker on their roster I'd trade for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I'm sorry, Drew White is much closer in the conversation with Alabama's inside linebackers from a production standpoint. And I'm not talking NFL draft status because that's a different animal.
That's a different
plenty of guys that were mediocre college football players that went on to be, great pros because they have athleticism. Maybe they developed. And I also refuse to allow the league that decided Mitch Trubisky was better than Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson as the arbiter on who's the better college football player. Okay. So
I felt like a personal blow as a Bears
it was
fan.
not
I'm going to let that go.
It was not to you because the Bears weren't the only franchise that looked at Mitch Trubisky as a better player.
Well, and they didn't call and ask my opinion, unfortunately.
Right.
They must have lost my number.
Right. So my point is that when you look at college production, college play, I don't think the gap in talent is as enormous as people make it out to be. Is there a gap? Yeah. And there are some positions where that gap is pretty wide. Cornerback, it's pretty wide.
And wide receiver.
Wide receiver is wide in regards to the fact that they clearly have the best player. No question.
Fair enough.
I don't think Notre Dame's trotting out a bunch of bums. That's my and get past number one.
Right.
It's a more competitive conversation, and Notre Dame's number one isn't exactly as stiff,
Right.
Is the gap at receiver wider from in Alabama's favor than the gap at tight end is in Notre Dame's favor? I don't think that it is.
Sure.
So that's where I get down to this. I think that the perception that Alabama is going to crush Notre Dame is based on two things. Number one, tradition. Or not tradition, history. How Alabama has proven that it can get on the stage and play well. And when you win as many titles as Nick Saban has won, what's it, 6, right? 5 at Bama, 1 at LSU. And you've won 2 titles in the playoff era. You can have the mulligan of the 2018 title game.
Sure.
Notre Dame can't afford to call the ACC title game a mulligan because they don't have the track record of success in those big moments to say, well, that was just a bad game. We'll find out if that was just a bad game on Friday. So, and it's also a combination of, up to this point, Alabama has taken the talent they have and maximized it on offense. And Notre Dame has not. And that, to me, is a big part of this.
The elephant in the room on that one for me is if we're going to – let's compare quarterbacks. Let's do that real fast because Mac Jones's athletic ability and his arm talent is nowhere near what I shouldn't say nowhere near. It's not as good as Ian Book. I'm sorry.
Arm talent in regards to arm strength and those.
That's what I'm talking about.
Correct.
That's what I'm talking about.
We're not talking about the results.
Because Ian Book can make all the throws that Mac Jones makes. He can. As far as distances and things of that nature. He can make all of those throws. And then if you want to add on the running ability of Ian Book, he he just above and beyond what Mac Jones.
Because even if you wanted to say, okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and Mac Jones has a little bit better physical arm talent than Ian Book. Let's play devil's advocate, because I agree with you. The gap. This is the point. The gap between their arm talent and the gap between their athleticism and mobility is night and day.
Yes.
One is close. You can make a case for Mac Jones. Again, we're talking just physical talent. The point is the difference between the two is not physical.
Correct.
It's mental, it's confidence. And it's also coaching.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with it. And that's the point I was going to make. If you're just talking from a talent standpoint, I'm taking Ian Book in every day that ends in Y. I would take him every time. But if you're talking about a guy,
I've never heard that before. That's awesome. I've never heard that before. That's great.
You're welcome.
I'm like, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah, they all.
I'm taking him every time. And the reason I would take Mac Jones, though, if we're talking about the complete football player, is because he's got the confidence to let it sling. Yeah. And
you just said it. There's a difference between physical talent and football player.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's why I would take Mac Jones right now, because he has the confidence to put it into tight windows. He's got the confidence to put it down the field. He's got the confidence in his receivers. And look, we've seen Ian Book with that confidence, just not consistently.
And not in big games.
And not in big games.
Not often in big games.
So that is, if we're comparing talent, there's not much of a difference there.
So we've justified why we're picking Alabama to win in that sense. So let's kind of dive in, Vince, as to how you see the game playing out. So I think that for me is kind of okay. So we've explained why we did this, but as far as how you see the game playing out specifically, we got the matchups and lack of faith in coaching and lack of faith in the quarterback at times, and history, and it's not always Ian Book, right? I mean,
no.
Happened to be the quarterback against Clemson the last two times that they played in a championship on the line, but he wasn't their quarterback in 2015 Fiesta Bowl. He wasn't the quarterback when they played Alabama in 2012. Neither was his position coach or his offensive coordinator. He was the backup. So, he happens to have been, he wasn't the quarterback when they went down to Miami, in 2017 and got beat, so I'm not putting all this on Ian Book. This isn't an Ian Book thing. There's been one constant through this entire stretch of getting blasted in big games, and it's not Ian Book and it's not Tommy Rees.
No. It's the head man. It's Brian Kelly, and it's his program. So if good things happen, he gets the accolades,
as he should.
And if bad things happen, and that's how football works. That's how.
Right.
So so it's a situation of recent history under Brian Kelly and what that looks like. And that's one of the main reasons I probably made the score prediction that I did. And so as far as how the game plays out, you want me to start kind of, I think the defense is going to play well at the beginning. I've knocked Clark Lee for some of his game planning and some of his lack of adjustments against Clemson. But I think he's a heck of a coach. And I think
that was the anomaly.
Right. And he has earned that mulligan, in my opinion.
Correct.
So I think he's going to bounce back, and I think he's going to have a great game as a coach and as the coordinator. And I think this defense hangs in tight. And I think they do a good job against this Alabama team early. My fear is that the offense isn't going to be able to respond. And eventually, like a dam, it's just going to get more and more pressure on this defense, and eventually it's going to break. And the defense is only going to be able to do so much if the offense isn't scoring.
Right.
And that's how I fear that this is going to go. I think it's going to be close after the first quarter. I think it very well could be a 1 possession, maybe 1.5 possession, like a 10-point situation in favor of Alabama after the first quarter. But I think kind of similar to what happened in the Clemson game, I think that second quarter could be bloodshed, and it could be over at halftime if the offense doesn't respond. And I unfortunately, I do not have the confidence in the offensive staff and in the offensive game plan and what we've seen from the offense up to this point that they're going to be able to hang with Alabama, because you've got to match what they're doing if you want to be in the game at the end. And I just don't have the faith that that's going to happen.
That's where, Vince, that's where my 47-20 prediction came from.
Correct.
It's that lack of confidence that – now, I'll say this in response to your comments about Brian Kelly. He's done it so much that it would have been stupid for him to say anything else. I will say that. Like, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but it would be stupid for them to come in and say, hey, we're going to change some things. We're going to be more disruptive. We're going to be more explosive. We're going to do some concepts that are different because we got to prepare for Alabama. That would be stupid for him to do that, in my opinion. So, I'm not going to bang him too much for what he said. And I ripped him after he made some comments early in the year about, I think it was before the Clemson game. He had made some comments, and I was like, this is just Kelly doing what he does. And then he came out against Clemson like playing like gangbusters.
Yes, that's true.
Time. So I'm gonna not hammer him for that yet. I'm gonna hammer him if they actually do that. If we actually see that same old in the game. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that he's playing coy, because you and I both know Kelly knows how to manipulate the media.
You know what? It's one of the things he's best at.
Right. And I don't mean that as an insult toward the media. We have to report what he says. We can't infer, well, I think what he really means is this. That's not responsible journalism. This is, hey, this is what he said, and so I'm going to respond to what he said.
Right.
And so that was not a shot at anybody. I think Brian Kelly is doing what he needs to do, because he's got to always do what's best for his program, and we in the media have to, do what we have to do and report on it and critique it and analyze it. But we also can't pretend he's making stuff. We can't say, well, he said this, but I'm going to change it because I think he means this. That's irresponsible journalism. And I don't really know anybody that covers the Notre Dame beat that would do that. They're gonna hey, this is what he said, and then we'll respond to what he said. And if it turns out to not be true, then we'll criticize it. So I'm not going to criticize him too much for that. And I'm just going to I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to say that that the reason I could see Notre Dame winning this game is twofold. Number one, really threefold. Number one is I agree with your point about the defense. I think the defense is a very prideful group. It's a lot of veteran players that the next time they lose, or if they win 2 more games, it's the last time they're ever putting on that gold helmet. So I'd be surprised if we don't see the best of Dalen Hayes and Adio Ganduzi and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Sean Crawford and those kind of guys. I'd just be surprised. That doesn't mean it's going to be good enough to win, but I don't think it's going to look like it did against Clemson in the ACC title game. I think what you're saying is basically you're looking for a repeat of the 2018 Cotton Bowl is kind of what you're saying, which is defense is going to do its part early, but the offense is going to keep giving them the ball back without scores, and eventually you can't stop this team for 4 quarters. They're not North Carolina.
Right.
So I think in your scenario, that's kind of where I came up with my 47-20. Is I think the offense is going to do what they do, and they're not going to change. They'll make a wrinkle here, make a wrinkle there that maybe works for here and there, but those things don't change for 60 minutes, and maybe they hang with them early, but eventually Alabama's going to make adjustments, and Notre Dame's not going to make them. I think it's going to be over more in the third quarter. I think it's going to be somewhat close at halftime, maybe like 34-17 or 31-14, something like that.
It may be that score, but I think that'll feel like a lot more.
It will, but
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's kind of those things like, 31-14, Notre Dame starts the ball with the second half, that kind of thing. But I think it'll get over pretty quickly if that's the case. And that's my point is Alabama's going to score early, and now it's 38-14, and that's where it's over.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scenario that's the worst case scenario for me. Is Notre Dame's offense doesn't really come out hot, and they don't answer, because even you look at the North Carolina game, they answered North Carolina score for score after the first start, but then they didn't. When the defense made stops, the offense didn't take advantage and put the ball back in the end zone. I mean, it should have been 28-14 at halftime, or 28-17, but instead it was 17-17, I believe, at halftime. And so that's where I just don't have the faith that this offense is going to be able to do that. We saw it against Clemson. In the first matchup, the offense started fast and then didn't do anything after that. Now you can say, well, they moved the ball, but they didn't punch it in. Well, yeah, that's been a problem all year. That's not like that was the anomaly.
Not a new thing. Yeah.
Right. They did the same thing in the rematch against Clemson. And let's be honest, it was 13-10 in second quarter, and Clemson's got the ball. And if they go down and score a touchdown, they've got the lead. And I think the game would have looked a lot different instead. Jeremiah Owusu makes a freaky athletic play.
Mm-hmm.
Returns it for a touchdown. And on the next series, he makes another freaky athletic play. An instinctive play, forces a fumble. Notre Dame recovers, loses 2 yards on offense, but kicks a field goal. And next thing you know, it's 23-13, or 23-10, excuse me. And so you can't count on that happening against Alabama.
Right.
You're going to have to score offensively to get to that point. And they haven't shown us, they have given us no evidence.
That's the problem,
that the offense can go out there and do that. However, that's my 47-20 scenario.
However,
my 37-34 Notre Dame win scenario is going to look more at the players.
Okay.
And where I think Notre Dame has the ability to match up with Alabama. And I think Notre Dame's offensive line and Notre Dame's offense can score against Bama. This is not a vintage Alabama defense. We broke this down in 2 different podcasts.
You're absolutely right.
It doesn't mean it's a bad defense by any stretch. And if Notre Dame tries to do what they did against Clemson, they will score about what they scored against Clemson, 10 to 20 points. That's it. And this Bama defense isn't as good as the 2018 Clemson defense that's going to hold Notre Dame to 3, in my opinion. And I don't think I think Clemson presents some unique matchup disadvantages for Notre Dame, whereas Bama tries to play more straight up. And that helps Notre Dame's straight up offense be able to score 17 to 20 points.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I look at that. But I think that the talent is such that, look, Javon McKinley can make plays against the guys that Alabama has. Like Trayvon Grimes beat Patrick Surtain for a long touchdown in the SEC championship game. And with all due respect, I think Javon McKinley is a better college wide receiver than Trayvon Grimes. They can beat Josh Jobe. Are they going to beat him like a drum? No, but they can make enough big plays. You only need 3, 4, 5 of those big plays to really get it going. It's not like he's got to catch 15 balls for 280 yards. He just has to catch 5 or 6, and 2 or 3 of them need to be down the field balls. A tight end, Notre Dame has a significant advantage, in my opinion, when it comes to their talent at tight end compared to the Alabama linebackers and safeties when it comes to coverage. They've struggled all year. And again, if we're talking about the history of how these teams perform, Alabama's had trouble all year with Kyle Pitts. They had trouble with the Ole Miss tight end. I mean, you remember that little delay pop pass that they hit early in that game to spark them to their first touchdown? They had trouble with – there's been, I think, 4 or 5 different times this year that they've had trouble with tight ends. Some of the names are escaping me, but that's been an issue all year. And outside of Kyle Pitts, they don't have tight end. They haven't faced tight ends that are at the level of the Notre Dame kids.
Agreed.
With all due respect to Florida doesn't have 2 guys like Notre Dame has.
Sure.
So, that's an area where you're like, look, Notre Dame's players are better than Alabama's players, right? And Alabama's got a big physical offensive line, and there haven't been a lot of SEC offensive lines that could really handle that front 7. Well, Notre Dame has one, at least talent-wise, they have one. Ian Book, you mentioned, it has the physical talent to make some plays against Alabama as a runner and a thrower.
No doubt.
So in my other scenario, it's like, okay, well, look, what we're going to see is because Notre Dame has nothing to lose, there's zero pressure on Notre Dame from a 2020 view. Now, I think there's pressure on Notre Dame from a big picture standpoint. And we've talked about that, and I'll have more on that after the game, depending on how it goes. But as far as this particular football team, because this 2020 football team doesn't have the same weight on its shoulders that Brian Kelly has, because they didn't play in the 2015 Fiesta. Sean Crawford's the only guy on the roster who was on that team, and he didn't play that year. He was hurt. I wasn't a knock. I mean, he was a freshman.
No, it's just that when you're mentioning something that only he has done and you have to go back to 2015, it just makes me laugh because he's been there forever. That's all it is to me.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest. A lot of the guys that are playing for Notre Dame now didn't play in the 2018 Cotton Bowl. Javon McKinley didn't play in that game. Kyron Williams wasn't on the team. Chris Tyree wasn't on the team. Avery Davis was, I think, still a quarterback then, or maybe he was a running back that year. He was a running back that year. Ben Skowronek was at Northwestern, right? I mean, you look at the defense. Jeremiah Wusu-Kormo didn't play in that game. Drew White didn't play in that game. Nick McLeod was on a different team. Kyle Hamilton was in high school.
On the team.
Right,
yeah.
He was in high school. Clarence Lewis was in high school, so Isaiah Foskey was still in high school. So the point is that history shouldn't affect the players as much as it'll maybe be on Brian Kelly's shoulders, or even like a Tommy Rees, because Tommy Rees is one of the guys that has kind of been through a lot of that, as as a player in 2012 and 2013, and then as a coach in 2017, 18, and 19, and this year. So I think the players will be loose. I don't see them playing tight.
Sure.
My hope is that Brian Kelly goes to Tommy Rees and says, let's have some fun. Let's do some things. There's some concepts you've been wanting to run. Let's run them. There's some things we want to try. Let's try them. We have nothing to lose, so we're going to give them our best shot. And that's my hope. I don't know if they're going to do that or not, but that's my hope that Tommy Rees and Lance Taylor and John McNulty and Dell Alexander and Jeff Quinn say, hey, look, what can we do? Let's maybe take some concepts that we've seen other teams use. Let's go back through the season and find some things that have worked for us. Let's throw some of the opponent's medicine at them a little bit, and do some of the things that they're doing. And
there's plenty of things on film that people have done against Alabama that could work really, really well for
with
Notre Dame.
Dame's because see, that's the thing, and you've seen this, Vince, as a coach. How many times have you been in a meeting, an offensive staff meeting, breaking down film of your upcoming opponent, where one of the coaches says, boy, I really like that concept. And so you ask, okay, why? Well, look, that guy got open, blah, 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 blah. And my response is always, well, who for our team can do that?
Exactly.
So that concept may have worked, but our tight end is a blocker. Their tight end is Kyle Pitts, right? But what, to your point, when you see those things being successful, you're like, well, Notre Dame has dudes that can do that. Well, Notre Dame has a guy that can do that. Well, Notre Dame has a line that can do that. Well, Notre Dame has a quarterback that can do that. It's about whether or not they will. And I think that's one of the differences. And when I thought about the 2012 game, and I really looked back on it, so, that was one of those games where everything was going to have to go right for Notre Dame. Like, everything was going to have to go perfect.
Yeah.
For Notre Dame to make this a game, I don't think they have to play the perfect game. They didn't play far from played the perfect game against Clemson on November 7th and still won.
They scored on 2 drives.
Team. Right.
2 drives, touchdowns.
Fumbled a ball into the end zone, had to settle for a bunch of field goals. I don't see those things repeating necessarily in this game. So it's about, look, the weapons are there for Notre Dame to score. And I really, truly believe that if Notre Dame goes into the fourth quarter and this is a game, and when I mean game, I don't mean like they're down 10-17, but they're down within a score or maybe even have a lead, I think Notre Dame will win because we haven't seen Alabama in that kind of pressure situation.
Sure.
We just haven't. Mac Jones hasn't really been in that moment. The only time he really was in that kind of game, they lost. And that was to Auburn last year. And he threw a couple bad picks in that game. So, to your point, you had mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, this is not a guy that's been pressured a whole lot. Ian Book has been through some wars.
No doubt.
So if Ian Book goes into the fourth quarter, having played in a way that he got Notre Dame into a situation where it's a close game, he's not going to shrink in the fourth quarter. Ian Book's going to shrink in the first quarter. I mean, that's the reality. When he's played poorly,
right.
We're see it right away.
We're going to know it right away.
This is who Ian Book is. For Ian, it's never been a moment situation. It's been sort of there's just this, like, he just gets hesitant. He's afraid to make a mistake. When he plays loose, he's really good. And I point back to the 2017 bowl game against LSU. I point to his first couple starts of 2018 against Stanford. I mean, at that time, that was a big moment. Stanford was ranked 7th. Now, we know that Stanford ended up not being as good. They were not really a top 10 team. But Ian Book didn't know that on September 29th of 2018. He thought it was a top 10 team. Sure. And he shredded them. So we've seen him in play with that kind of that looseness, that confidence.
And to your point that you made, I don't know which podcast it was.
There's a lot of them.
But you made the point that there is no reason that this team should be tight in any way on either side of the ball. You've got nothing to – you're a 20-point underdog. You have no reason to be tight. You should be as loose and as just feeling good and just going out there with nothing to lose, man.
Let it loose.
Nothing to lose.
Have faith in your brothers. Have faith in your teammates. Have faith in your coaches and go play. And that's the scenario in which I think Notre Dame can play in this game. And the reason it's either, to me, in my opinion, this is a prediction that I have. I don't think Notre Dame loses a close game. I don't think that's an option. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I see it as they're either going to get blown out or they're going to win a close game. That's how I see it.
Okay.
Because I do feel like if you get this team in the fourth quarter, they're battle tested. Notre Dame has been in these wars plenty of times.
Yeah.
Ian Book has been in these battles plenty of times. I feel like if Notre Dame gets into the fourth quarter with, hey guys, we got a shot, this is a team that's going to have that, this isn't going to look like it did against Georgia last year in the fourth quarter.
I like where your head's at, Swami.
So that's why I feel like it. And that's why it's so important that they start fast. And we talked about this in the offensive keys to the game. They have to answer Alabama score for score. Not only
Crucial.
Practically speaking, it's important, but I think they need it for their own psyche, because
yes,
you and I both know this, Vince. It's one thing to believe you can win, and I've made this point before. It's one thing to believe you can win. It's another thing to know you can win, and there is a difference. And I've pointed this out before. I'm going to use my own coaching experience to point this out. And I've people who have listened to me over the years have heard this story before. But my first year as a coach, we had an 11-1 team. We were a top 5 team in the country. We had just beaten the number 2 seed in our bracket. This is in the Division III playoffs. We had just gone to their place, beat them 41-0. We knew we were good. And we thought when we went to play Mount Union in the third round, we thought we could win. They knew they were going to win. And there is a difference. And the difference is when things start going bad for you, especially if it's early, that doubt creeps in for the team that thinks they can win. The team that knows they can win never gets rattled, no matter how much they're down. So that's why it's so important for the other team, the underdog, to start well. Because if you start well, you have that confidence like, hey, we do belong on this stage. We do belong here. And I think you saw that against Clemson. When Kyron Williams went off for that long run, Vince, you could see it on the sideline. There was just like, you know what? We are really good. And you just saw it the whole game. Like,
absolutely.
They were excited when they won that game. They weren't surprised.
Right.
And that's why starting fast is so important. So that's why I feel like if they start fast and it is a battle, I see Notre Dame winning this game in the end.
Yeah.
If they fall behind early and the offense is punting or turning it over or settling for field goals, and Alabama's up 14-6 because your first 2 drives went for field goals and they went for touchdown, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be over by the third quarter.
Yep.
If then. So that's why my 2 predictions are what they are. And they're basically based on how the first half is going to go. If it's a battle in the first 2 quarters, Notre Dame will win it in the end. If Notre Dame struggles offensively in the first 2 quarters, Alabama will blow them out. And that's kind of where I come down on it.
We're talking about how this thing's going to play out. I think to kind of echo your point, I think we're going to know how this game's going to go after the first quarter. And I know that that's early, that there's still 3 quarters left to play. But with this team, you have seen what they are in the first quarter. Whether
we know what to look for. We know what to look for.
Yeah, whether you're talking about North Carolina, where they were matching score for score, and you just knew, okay, this offense is they're moving on all the same cylinders, and that defense just needs to settle down, and they did. I think Clemson the second time around, once that first quarter was over, I think we knew this is not going to go well.
You could see it. You could see it early.
See it. That's exactly right.
Early,
and you mentioned it with Ian Book. I personally like Ian Book. I would go to battle with Ian Book as his coach. I would. And I think he's a good quarterback. And I think he has overachieved at Notre Dame from what we all thought he would be when he was recruited to Notre Dame. But he is what he is in the first quarter. And whatever he is in the first quarter, that's what he's going to be the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And whether he's going to be that confident, cocky in a good way, swagger.
Yeah.
If he's going to be that guy, he'll be that guy the whole way. But if he's, chopping his feet and he's trying to bail out of the pocket weirdly, and he's eating the ball and, my pet peeve, run out of bounds for a sack. If he's doing all that in the first quarter, he's going to do that the rest of the way.
Yeah. And tell me if you agree with this, Vince. What I'm referring to as far as how Ian Book's going to be in the first quarter, I don't even mean how he's performing. To me, it's going to be more about, he could even make a turnover early. And I say, you know what, that was a turnover. But if the defense can make a stop here, let me just explain. If the defense can make a stop here, I really like this because he took a shot, he took a chance, and that's my point.
Depends on the turnover.
If it's a pick six, but you know what I mean? Like if it's 3rd and 10 at midfield and he takes a shot on a post route and it gets picked off, right? I can live with those kind of mistakes.
Sure, I get that.
And I want to see him being aggressive because I feel like if he's aggressive, and he's attacking and he's playing loose with nothing to lose. We saw it against LSU. He threw that pick in the third quarter, and it didn't faze him, right? He's never been a guy that's necessarily – Virginia Tech, I thought we saw this. He threw that really bad pick against Virginia Tech, and he just kept battling. It didn't faze him. He's never been a guy that's been fazed by turning the ball over. He gets fazed because he's convinced himself before the game has even started that he can't turn the ball over, he can't make a mistake. It's like
there's
this
going to be pressure.
It's like this weird Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing with Ian Book sometimes. And I get why. I mean, I've made jokes before about Brian Kelly, and it's like he's his, third son or something like that. But I get why Brian Kelly is so loyal to Ian Book.
Sure.
Because of the fact that he is that. I think Brian Kelly sees a lot of his own, Division II coach, had to work his way up, never got anything handed to him. And that's kind of how Ian Book is, and he's that gritty gamer and that kind of thing. But we're going to know mentality-wise who Ian Book is going to be in this game by the first quarter. And he may not even necessarily be like 9 of 10. But if he comes out picking Alabama apart early, which he's capable of, I'm going to say, boy, this is going to be a fun game to watch. And I also think that what that's going to do, Vince, is that's going to give the defense a lot of confidence. Like, hey, we can play loose because Ian's out there, he's dealing. And we know Javon's going to go off now. And we know that Mayer and Tremble are going to go off now. Avery Davis is going to go off. Avery Davis is an underrated guy, in my opinion, Vince, because you even look at – did you watch the halftime segment between the Colorado and Texas game where Jesse Palmer was breaking down the –
I heard about it. I did not see it.
He was showing the stuff that you and I have been talking about since that game was over, which is there were guys open. It's just Ian Book wasn't throwing the ball. And there was one play where Avery Davis just smokes the safety. What should have been a touchdown, and he just didn't throw him the ball. It was almost the same route that they scored on the last time, but this time he wasn't way wide open like he was the first time, and Ian didn't throw the ball because he had already kind of let the pressure bother him. It was already in his head, but we saw that from the beginning of the game.
Correct.
So, I think Notre Dame has the weapons, and if Ian Book comes out dealing early, you're going to see a lot of confidence from the offense, defense, like, hey, the offense has our back. We can play loose and go play fast, and that's where you get that great team ball.
Yep.
And that's why you can kind of shake off a mistake or a touchdown because Bama's going to score. Clark Lee is going to be in the head. Hey, guys, they're going to make plays. This is a great team. They're going to make plays.
Right.
We got to bounce back. We're fine. We'll be fine. We just go correct ourselves. But if they score, Notre Dame's offense punts, and then Bama scores, and then Notre Dame's offense punts, now it's like we can't let them score again. Then you start putting that kind of pressure on yourself. That's how you get blown out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it is important that the offense starts fast. So that's how I see the two games going, how the two different scores going.
I could see it both ways. I really could.
Ian Book coming out dealing, and it's going to be the Notre Dame defensive line getting after Mac Jones. If Notre Dame's going to win and pull off the upset, and the coaches do the things that the coaches need to do, and the guys really play at a high level, we're going to see it in Ian Book dealing and the defensive line balling out. Yep. That's how I see it. That's the recipe for Notre Dame winning. And because Ian Book's not balling out if the Notre Dame offense, you know what I mean? Like
for sure.
Playing all this kind of thing. So that's kind of my two scenarios for how the game will play out. It's going to be one of – I really just don't see a scenario in which Notre Dame – it's a close game and Notre Dame loses. I don't. I think because it is such a battle-tested team.
Sure.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, I think it's time to give out some game balls.
Yes.
Or to predict what those game balls are going to be. Time to give out what we think will be the game balls. And we're going to do this two different ways, Brian. And I don't think we've done it this way earlier. So we're going to do it this way now. We're going to give out game balls on both sides of the ball like we always do. But the first one is going to be if Notre Dame wins. And then the second one will be if Alabama wins. So who's going to get that game ball in both scenarios? Because obviously we're going to be giving out game balls to the winning team. I mean, it's hard to give out a game ball when you lose.
You tried that in the ACC championship game, and I wasn't having it.
I did. And you called my bluff, and I get it. I totally understand. So here we go. So let's talk offense first. We're both offensive coaches, so that's what's going to lead off for us. If Notre Dame wins this game, I will go first. I will say if Notre Dame wins this game, Ian Book just played one of the best games of his life. Mm-hmm. And he played with confidence. He played with swagger, and he put the team on his shoulders. and he's going to walk out of there with the game ball, and no one will be happier about that than Brian Kelly. It'll be the first thing he says at his press conference, that I gave the game ball to my son, Ian Book.
And I mean quarterback.
I mean
quarterback.
to our quarterback, Ian Book. So if Notre Dame wins this game, Ian Book had a game. He gets my game ball on offense.
I don't see how. Look, what do I always say about winning championships? You can't win championships without great quarterback play.
Right.
I mean, so how could I then say that and then be like, but Kyron Williams is going to get the game ball? You know what I mean? Like, if Notre Dame's going to win this game, Ian Book has to play great, and he won't be the only one. You know, we'll probably be debating after the game for our player of the game. For is it going to be Kyron? Is it going to be Javon McKinley, Michael Mayer? I mean, you know, Liam Eichenberg, Robert Hainsey. We're going to have that debate because Ian Book isn't going to. You don't win these games all by yourself. Yeah. You know, when you look at how well Trevor Lawrence played against Bama in 2018, he had help. You know, Justin Ross had that freaky behind his back one-handed catch, right? Like, you have to have help. But it's going to be about Ian Book delivering the ball and getting it out to his playmakers and managing the offense and responding to early adversity with big plays and big throws and sparking. Because the confidence in this team is going to come from what are they getting at quarterback. And if this team plays well enough to win the game, I don't see a scenario in which – I mean, it's I believe that Dallas can always have an indoor stadium, right? They can always put a roof over the top to make. Yes. You can't say, well, barring like a monsoon. No, that's not an option.
It's not going to happen.
Know what I mean,
no monsoon in this one.
This is going to be about who the better team is, and if Notre Dame is good enough to win this game, it's going to have to be because Ian Book plays well, and this doesn't mean running around 3 different directions and launching a ball 70 yards downfield for a touchdown. That's not what we're talking about. It's just about. He's getting the ball out. When Avery Davis wins that route, get the ball to him. When Javon McKinley's got the one-on-one matchup you like, get him the ball. When it's 2nd and 10 and they bail and drop 8, check that sucker down to Kyron Williams for a 6-yard gain, and then hit Michael Mayer on 3rd and 4. Those are the kind of things that are going to spark the offense. Other guys may get the big plays, but it's all going to be set up by Ian Book playing well. So if they're in this game, if they win this game, it's going to on offense. It's going to be Ian Book. I don't even know if he has to have the game of his life. I just think he has to play like he does when he plays well. He has to play like he did against Stanford in 2018. He has to play like he did against Navy last year. He has to play like he did against, Boston College this season. He has to do what he's shown he's capable of. I don't think he has to play out of his mind. I think it'll go down as the biggest game of his career because of the magnitude. My point simply being, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, my point simply, he doesn't have to go like 29 of 31 and for 560 yards. He just has to run the offense. That's not his game. He just has to play his game. He has to get the ball out to his teammates because, again, he has the teammates that are capable of beating Bama. And he just has to get the ball out. And to me, that's the difference between Florida and Notre Dame from a talent. It's not – with all due respect to the talent at Florida, they don't beat Notre Dame in talent. They've got very good players.
With you, yeah.
But I'll take Javon McKinley and Avery Davis and Michael Mayer and Tommy Tremble and way better running backs at Notre Dame than they have at Florida, and a way better offensive line than Florida has.
Terrible.
The difference is the quarterback.
Right.
And if Ian Book plays with the confidence that we see from other great quarterbacks and what we've seen from him at times, he'll have a big day.
Yep.
Notre Dame will have a chance to win, and he'll get the game ball. That's how I see it playing out.
I agree. And so let's flip the script. Alabama wins this game. Who gets your offensive game ball? I'll let you lead off this time.
Devonte Smith. I mean, he's going to go off, in my opinion. I mean,
he's going to have 10 catches for 200 yards, and one of those is going to be just a bomb. It's going to be the Sports Center highlight of the night.
Sure. Kind of. It'll be like he'll have like 6 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns that are just 60-yard bombs, that kind of thing. It'll be him, or Notre Dame plays off and he catches like 12 balls for 160 yards and like 8 of them are 3rd down conversions. Either way, it's going to be and that's what makes him so good.
Yeah, exactly.
If you try to stop the deep game, he can catch 10 balls for and be a chain mover. He's such a great all-around receiver and a smart receiver, well-coached receiver, just a skilled receiver. He's just really going to be hard to defeat. So, I imagine that the media will Mac Jones, because that's just kind of how it goes. Quarterbacks get all the love, but
it'll be
Devonte Smith is the force behind that offense, in my opinion. And Najee Harris is a heck of a player, and he'll probably put up numbers, but it's Devonte Smith for me.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, you watched all the Alabama games. Watching Devonte Smith, it's pretty easy to throw to a guy like that.
And
Okay,
I'm a former receivers coach, so I love watching that kid play. I love
man,
because he's physically talented. I'm not trying to take anything away from his physical talent.
he's such just a
So,
technician,
oh
man.
my god,
Like,
it's really it's teaching tape. I'm like, that's teaching tape right there. That's like what you tell your kid to hey son, you want to be, this is what my dad did for me. I grew up in the 80s when VCRs just came around, and I wanted to be a quarterback. I didn't have anybody could teach me how to play. My dad was a baseball guy, so he said, hey, he VCR Joe Montana, John Elway. I mean, he's like, watch these guys, and
yeah,
wasn't the greatest advice because I can't be John Elway. But the point was, you learn from the people who are the best at what they do.
absolutely.
And Devonte Smith isn't a great player because he's 6'4", 230 and runs a 4.4.
Right.
Can't teach that. He's a great player because he plays the position as fundamentally sound and with the kind of high football IQ that I think can be taught. And that's why I say, if you're a receivers coach, if you're a parent, a father, or a mother of someone who wants to be a receiver, get him copies of Devonte Smith's games, because that is a kid if your kid plays football like that, I don't know what level his physical God-given ability will allow him to play at, but he's going to be a good player somewhere.
Yep.
And I just love watching the kid play. So maybe I'm a little biased, but I mean, the kid is just he's a heck of a football player.
I don't know why you'd be biased. He's going to be the best player on the field. So why would we not give him the game ball? I'm sorry. Just he's that good. So obviously that's where my game ball goes as well. I just think that he's going to stuff the stat sheet, and it's going to be painfully obvious you should get the game ball once this thing is over. If Alabama
I think
wins.
he's going to stuff the stat sheet no matter what.
Regardless, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, he's going to to me, he's going to have a good game no matter what. But if they win, he'll be the one that gets the game ball because
fair enough.
Ball him out.
Let's go over to defense. That other side of the ball. If Notre Dame wins this game, who gets the game ball for you?
Kyle Hamilton.
Okay,
I think the reason is because, I mean, so many guys have to play well. It's your ends, Dalen Hayes and Adi Ogundeji, you have to be great against the run. Your interior, Kurt Hinish is going to have to play a great game. Myron Tungvaloa, Jason Adamiola, they're all going to have big plays. Your linebackers have to be great. Jeremiah Wusu is going to have to play like an All-American, which he always does. Your corners have to hold their own. But to me, Kyle Hamilton has the kind of game wrecker skill that is so important against a team like Alabama.
Well, he can wreck it in different levels of the defense.
Every single level of the defense. And he's the only – and look, there's maybe 4 or 5 safeties in the country, maybe, that have the ability to dominate a game in every facet. If Notre Dame needed him to be an over-the-top free safety, he could get 3 pass breakups and a pick. They wanted him to be an alley player. He could have 13 tackles. I mean, he's such a diverse, smart football player. And when you consider how young he is, you sometimes we forget that he's just a sophomore.
Yeah,
I think he's still a teenager. I think I could be wrong on that.
Wow.
But he's just a smart player, a lot like Devonte Smith, except Kyle Hamilton's also 6'4", with basketball player length and physical. I mean, really tough kid. So I think if they're going to win, it's because he makes a couple game wrecker plays. Sure. It's going to be, him coming across the middle and, Devonte Smith makes some great leaping catch, but when he lands, Hamilton drills him and knocks the ball out, and Notre Dame recovers it, or he picks a pass off, or, Mac Jones is thinking, I can fit this ball in there. I've been doing it all year. And then he forgets that it's Kyle Hamilton back there, not somebody else. And so, getting that opportunity to make those kind of plays, I think he needs a big game. And it's kind of like you and I did that radio show before the North Carolina game, and I said the same thing. If Notre Dame's going to stop North Carolina, Kyle Hamilton needs to go off. Well, he was going off before he got ejected. I think he had 6 or 7 tackles in the second quarter.
He still ended up, I think, second on the team in tackles for the entire game. So,
and he got kicked out in the second quarter.
Right.
So it's a similar thing here. And because Alabama is not the vertical passing team that Clemson is, they're gonna throw a million short to intermediate passes, which means there's gonna be a lot of opportunities for Kyle Hamilton to make a play. And look, you can't avoid him and Jeremiah Wusu-Koroma. You can't avoid both of them unless Clark Lee decides to put them right on top of each other,
which would be ridiculous.
There'll be times for that, but I don't see him doing that. So, and I could see it being like I brought up the Denver Bronco Green Bay Packer upset Super Bowl from 97. Well, what was one of the big game-changing plays of that game? It was a safety blitz where Tyrone Braxton, I think it was Tyrone. No, it was Steve Atwater, came on a blitz and knocked the ball loose, and Tyrone Braxton recovered it. I think I had it reversed the other time. That's kind of play, long safety coming on a blitz, I think it's going to be plays like that's going to give Notre Dame a chance to stay in this game and win this game. So if the defense if they win the game, it's because they made some big time plays. And I think the guy that's going to be the beneficiary of that more than anyone else is going to be Kyle Hamilton. And I was torn because I wanted to go Myron Tungavaloa. I wanted to go Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I wanted to go Dalen Hayes. I wanted to go in so many different directions, but I was like, boy, the one guy that I think could be impacted all is going to be Kyle Hamilton. And so that's the guy that I'm going with.
No, I get that. And one of the things that you hit on about Kyle Hamilton is the reason that I picked Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And I just, when you talked about, look, I've watched more film on Alabama than I have on any other opponent of Notre Dame's this year. Okay. And what I've noticed is they love those intermediate routes. And I really think that for the same reason that you think Kyle Hamilton is going to be a game changer, I think that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah could be, because that's going to be in his wheelhouse of where he's dropping into coverage. And I think that Clark Lee is going to use him as a blitzer. I think he's going to use him dropping into coverage. I think he's going to be all over the field too. I mean, look, those two guys are bookends of this defense, right? One's going to be on one side, one's going to be on the other, one's going to be deep, one's going to be shallow, whatever. They're going to use those two.
There's going to be times where they bring them on blitzes from the same side of the field, and just pick your poison.
Absolutely. They're going to be used in conjunction with each other, right? And so I don't think you're wrong to go in either direction with these two guys because they're both game changers. And we've said it a million times. In big games, you need your studs to be studs. And if they're going to win this game, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Kyle Hamilton both have to be studs. They're both going to have great ball games if Notre Dame wins this game. Period. End of discussion. So I don't think you can go wrong either way. I went with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I guess this is potentially his last game. There's no way he's coming back next year. I would love for him to come back. There's nobody that would be more excited if he came back next year. But the bottom line is he's the best linebacker in the country. He's a first-round draft pick. He's not coming back. So this is the last time that those two guys are going to be able to play together.
Yeah. And he's a great kid.
He's a great kid.
I mean,
so
and not just because he's from Virginia.
It's just a bonus.
It's just an added bonus.
It's just a bonus.
It maybe leads into why he's a great kid. But,
right. That's just another box that's checked.
Right.
But no, he's gonna have a great game if Notre Dame wins, and it's gonna be fun to watch, frankly. So if Alabama wins, there's a lot of different places you could go with this one. Patrick Surtain is going to play well if they win. There's different levels. I went up front, and I went with Christian Barmore. What are you laughing about?
Great pick, Vince. Great pick.
Oh, no, you went the same way. No, look, let me explain my reasoning, because the games that I watched where he was successful, he was beating the ever-loving snot out of the center position, pushing them back, making plays. And where Notre Dame struggles, if they're going to struggle, it's because Ian Book can't step up into the pocket. When he escapes the pocket successfully, it's him going up the middle, not out the side, right? So if Barmore is having a game, and he's taking advantage of Zeke Correll or Josh Lugg, whoever happens
probably
to
be Josh Lugg based on what I've been able to gather.
So, so we saw Josh Lugg in the backfield more often than he should have been in the Clemson game. So if Barmore, if Alabama is successful defensively, that means they're shutting down Ian Book. That means they're keeping him in the pocket. They're not letting him scramble. I think that a lot of pressure gets put up front. Barmore is second on the team in sacks. He's got 6 sacks. He's got a bunch of tackles for loss. The kid's good. He's strong. It's not hard to get under the frame of a 6'7" center. And so that might potentially.
And he's listed at 6'5", but he's surprisingly good at winning the pad level battle for a 6'5" guy. Barmore, I'm talking about.
Right, and he's already 2 inches shorter than Josh Lugg. So That helps in that regard. So if Alabama is successful the way I think they could be successful, in the way that they will have to be to shut down Notre Dame's offense, I think Barmore is going to have one heck of a game.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be Patrick Surtain, because if Alabama wins in the way that we think that Alabama will win, if that in that scenario, Ian Book's not going to throw it at Patrick Surtain. It's going to be the whole point. He's not going to throw it. He's not going to. When Ian Book doesn't play well, he rarely turns the ball over, because he won't take those chances.
He just holds on to the ball.
Right. Yeah. And when he does turn it over, it's like over the middle of the field kind of thing. So I don't see that being the thing, where it's Patrick Surtain because of that. I don't think their linebackers or guys are going to make a ton of plays. It's going to be because Alabama's winning at the line of scrimmage. I mean, it's up the middle, like you said. And Will Anderson may make a sack or two, but it's going to be just that domination of Christian Barmore. And you talked about, the quarterback aspect of it, and that makes a lot of sense. But for me, it's the run game. It's if Notre Dame gets whipped in the middle in the run game, then they're just not going to be able to get it going. And they have to be able to run the football against Alabama. They have to.
Yep.
And so that's the bigger concern for me.
Sure.
Is that stopping the run game is then going to set him up for the impact plays in the pass game.
Yep.
And that's where I think what you talked about, where he's a really good power rusher. That's the kind of stuff that Clemson did to Notre Dame, that those inside rushes where they beat the right guard in the center, I think are things that play right into Alabama's wheelhouse.
Well, and he also has 3 pass breakups, okay? Yeah. And he's got 3 forced fumbles and 6 quarterback hurries. The man is everywhere.
Really, really good player. Yeah, no question. So, yeah, I see him being the player of the game. Again, that's usually not a sexy pick where, he may not get the media game ball. But for me, as far as when we watch this game and say, boy, that guy, their inability to block that guy is why they lost. And if they win the game, we're going to point to their game plan for how to contain him and block him and play against him is a big reason why they won, because Ian Book had time to throw and all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
So, yeah, that battle up the middle, and I had that in my midweek musings yesterday, the battle of the Notre Dame interior against the Alabama side is important. It's going to be that way on both sides of the ball. I had that in my defensive midweek musings as well, where the biggest matchup I'm looking for, and for the Notre Dame defense, is right up the middle. Yeah, if they can win that battle right up the middle, they're going to have a chance to be competitive. If they don't, they're going to get blasted because Alabama's going to run all over them. And the same thing is true on the other side of the ball. If Notre Dame can be successful up the middle with their run game and protection, then the offense is going to have a shot, as long as Ian Book's doing what he's capable of. So I think it's hard to not go with Christian Barmore. There's a lot of good players: Will Anderson Jr., Dylan Moses, Christian Harris. I could see one of the safeties making a big pick in the game, that they get the game ball, because a lot of times that'll go to a guy who makes the big play.
Sure.
But I think the most dominant player, if Alabama wins on defense, will be Christian Barmore.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. So that's going to put a bow on all of our pre-talk for the Alabama-Notre Dame game. And it's game time, Brian. That's really what it is. It's game time. We get to see what actually happens. We've talked about it a bunch. Now it's time to put the money where the mouth is and see what Notre Dame can do against the number 1 team in the country. And frankly, whatever happens, I love watching Notre Dame football. And if this is the last game of the season, it's going to be a very sad day for me, because we'll have to wait till spring ball. And who knows if we're going to be able to watch any of that. So, this could very well be the last game before the September 5th tilt in Tallahassee against Florida State. And this team for Notre Dame is going to look a heck of a lot different than they do on January 1st. So there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Because a lot of the names we've talked about in this show as being so important to Notre Dame winning are not going to be on the team.
They gone.
And that's one of the things I love about college football.
Me too.
It's such a new team every year.
Me too.
But hopefully this team hopefully we're sitting here about 8 or 9 days.
Absolutely.
Having a similar conversation about how we think Notre Dame's going to match up against Clemson or Ohio State. So
Clemson.
We'll see.
I mean,
their offensive coordinator's not going to be in the game now. It's like every break Ohio State can catch, they're catching. It just drives me nuts.
Team. They're still not a good football team. I'm sorry. But anyway, so that's going to do it for us. That's going to put a bow on it. Make sure you stay locked into irishbreakdown.com, especially during the game for our game day chat. Bryan and I will be putting our thoughts and as to what's going on down in Dallas at the Rose Bowl. And then we'll have, all of our post-game stuff too. We might even do a post-game reaction. We'll see how we're feeling once this game is over. So For Bryan
If Notre
Driskell,
Dame wins, maybe look for one. If Notre Dame loses, I will not be in the mood.
You and I are both. You and I do not do well when Notre Dame loses.
I would just be so grumpy, and that's
Yeah.
why I feel like I do better with writing, because I can proofread it and then say,
Sure.
yeah, that came across really mean. let me proof that and make that more coachy talk as opposed to it's a garbage call. Whereas if I'm doing it live, it's going to be just like, this guy's an idiot, and it'll be very unprofessional. And where you and I used to work a long time ago, they would do those post game shows, and I was like, I'll never ever do something like that. And I especially after now, of course, I would be of right mind doing that, but it would definitely, for me, it's like, if they lose, it's just I'm just not the kind of person that can just sit there calmly and.
Well, like during the game, you and I talked the whole time, obviously, whether it's on the chat or in text or whatever. But when the game is over, and if Notre Dame has lost, and this goes back, to the ACC championship or even, past years, it's like one word answers. Like you and I do not do well if Notre Dame loses. So
yes, I'm pissed.
I get that.
Right. And that's what I like about the writing aspect of it, because the writing is less emotional.
Sure.
It's more analytical, more thoughtful, the game observations that I put out after the game. So I feel like that calms me down. So by the time I walk out of the stadium, I'm in a calmer place. But like if we did like an immediate post-game reaction to Notre Dame losing a playoff game, it would come across as more of like a fan type of reaction than it would an analysis. And that's kind of why I'm hesitant to ever.
I got you. Hey, it's all good. See, I put it out there, and then we had a nice little chat about
wins. I can be professional. Hey, here they did this and this worked out well. I don't get like super like excited fanboy when they win. It's just like, okay, let's go do the job. But when they lose, I get really
I get upset too.
Unnecessarily critical. I get it. Is what I do when I talk, not so much when I write. I feel like I can, that's why I say there's no edit button with my mouth. It's like I said it, can't take it back.
Got me in a lot of trouble in the past.
Yeah, writing, I can look and say, I should probably I should, like, if I could tell you about some of the tweets that I've typed out, and then like, nah, I'm not gonna send that.
That's fair.
It's a much better thing.
That's fair.
Anyway, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being with us. We really appreciate it. This has been such a strong finish to the year for us when it comes to our site growing, and we're really looking forward to you guys staying with us in the off season, because win or lose, we're going to have a lot next week. If it's a win, we're getting ready for the national title game. We'll talk about what the implications of this win would mean for the Notre Dame program. If they lose, we're going to dive right into where is Notre Dame as a program. If they lose as a close game, what that meant for Notre Dame and how this is a positive step for Notre Dame. If they get whooped, we're going to talk about that too.
Yep.
And then we'll dive right into our postseason analysis of this Notre Dame team. We'll do our postmortem, and then we'll start talking about where is Notre Dame as a program. So win or lose on Saturday, come back to irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you stay locked into our podcast, because we are going to have plenty of content. We are not off-season people. There is no off-season. We are talking Notre Dame football year round, and we appreciate y'all. And with the new year coming up, I think, Vince, about kind of where we were about 8 months ago with the site, and you and I having conversations about, I don't know if we're going to make it, man, because of everything going on. And now to see our site growing 200-300% from where it was, it's appreciated, and I certainly feel blessed that y'all have been a part of what we're doing here at Irish Breakdown, and Vince, I appreciate you and all you're doing, but hopefully we've got another one of these upcoming game breakdowns here next week. But if not,
absolutely
appreciate y'all being with us through what has been the weirdest season of my life. Certainly. So but anyway, thanks everybody, and Vince, thanks for being a part of this with me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Truly. Thank you. So for Bryan Driskell, I'm Vince DeDario. We will talk to you next time on Irish Breakdown Podcast.